everyone, and welcome to the launch of Everyone Wins a Balloon. It's just a pity that we don't have champagne. I asked, but somehow it just didn't happen. But we do have some real, genuine hard copies, because I'm increasingly of a mind that people do read hard copies. And of course, we have balloons, albeit sort of paperish. And on the back is where you can just instantly access it online if you're not lucky enough to be in the room where we're spreading out the hard copy. I'm going to start with just very quick introductions, and then I want to tell you why, as the person who wrote this and feels like she has spent a lifetime drafting this, it is so exciting to actually get it to the point where I'm not allowed to change anything ever again. So I'm Susan Scott Parker from Scott Parker International, and on my right I have...
Hi everyone, I'm Sally Owen, the co-managing director of Purple Space. Purple Space is the world's only disability network of networks, operating in 60 countries to help organisations through the power of their disability networks to build disability confidence from the inside out.
That's Purple Space.
Hi, I'm Nasser Siabi. I'm the chief executive of Microlink, and Microlink is a company that provides reasonable accommodation, reasonable adjustment program for many multinational companies across the world.
And so Everyone Wins a Balloon is my attempt to capture the business and ethical rationale for providing every employee with the tools, flexibility, and expertise and accessibility that they need in order to do their job well and thrive at work. It seems a little odd to me that I have to write a whole range of different approaches and arguments to demonstrate that treating people fairly by giving them the tools they need because they have a disability and or health condition enhances productivity, employee engagement, reduces health and safety risks, reduces all kinds of risks. But we do, because what we do know is we look at what's going on now across the global business community, the public sector, large organizations everywhere. There's still a fundamental mismatch between the aspiration to actually enable productivity and inclusion across the workforce. It doesn't work when it comes to that moment when an employee with a disability or health condition says, actually, I need you to do something different. I need a new piece of kit. I need something done differently if I'm going to do really well here. And so what I've done is to try to frame out a new way of looking at it, where we're talking about adjustment management rather than leaving employees with disabilities at the mercy, if you like, of an ad hoc, unstructured system where even the managers can't figure out how to make it work, where it can take 18 months after you've said to your manager, those lights give me migraines, before they even begin to replace those lights. And so it's meant to be a definitive guide for disability employee network leaders as they're having conversations with senior players in the company, in the public sector organization, to say, this is how you design a system that efficiently, cost-effectively manages the process that moves from this is what I'm requesting as an adjustment to delivering that adjustment within 20 working days, not 3, 6, 12 months, 20 working days. How you then marshal the arguments around it when most of the data that would prove I'm right is hidden from both the employer because they're not tracking sickness absence, and of course they're not at all likely to ever put it out in the public domain. I want to take just a moment to thank the Government of Canada for putting out the insights they gained when they undertook detailed research asking their people what happens when you ask for an adjustment. So you'll see references to that data throughout the report because, well, if you've seen a company report on how the fact that 77% of people with visible disabilities were forced to prove they had a disability before they could even be considered as qualified to make an accommodation happen for them, well, please send it to me. I also wanted to just point out that what we're talking about here is a fundamental shift where we're saying at the moment in many companies, the focus is compliance. And yet actually what we're up against is the compliance paradox, where the more you try to comply, which means you ask and require your people to prove they're disabled enough to trigger a legal obligation to even consider, in my language, treating them properly and giving them the tools they need, the greater your legal and reputation risk. That actually the compliance culture generates risk rather than mitigates. And we're also, of course, talking about some fundamental principles in terms of how you engineer the process internally and how you actually help senior executives to understand what's really going on in the business, with the premise, of course, being that it's people with disabilities in your organization who know what's really going on, and their managers. And so while it's intended to help disability employee networks present a rational case for doing this properly, it's also, of course, meant to help senior executives to get a better sense of what a fit-for-purpose process would look like. I'm not asking for best practice. I thought just fit for purpose would be really sensible. And so there's a gap analysis which shows you on the one side what a fit-for-purpose system feels like, how people describe it, what they see, and then on the other side, quite simply, what happens when the system isn't fit for purpose. All just to simplify the process of moving from ad hoc to managed adjustments. And so, really pleased to be doing this in partnership with Purple Space, because of course it was at the global Purple Space, what did we call it, the summit, the Global Disability Employee Network Summit last year, that employees with disabilities were invited to vote on what they wanted, the 3 top things they wanted their employers to do that would enable them to really thrive at work. And of course, adjustments was right at the heart of it. Do it much better. And so, turning to you then at Purple Space, why are your members asking their employers to do so much better in how they provide adjustments? And Jean, I've done a classic. Because you're joining remotely from Prague, I didn't even ask you to introduce yourself. It's just, I'm sorry, all my fault. Jean, introduce yourself. Introduce yourself.
No. Hello, very honored to be here. Although very sorry I cannot be there with you in person. Susan, Sally, Nasser. So first of all, thank you for to the unstoppable Susan Scott Parker and our incredible friends at Purple Space for inviting me to be part of this panel. Jean Ko here, non-binary, neurodivergent Filipino Chinese based in Prague with my partner and our 5 rescue cats. Yes, I won the diversity jackpot, but to be honest, I would rather I won the Euro jackpot. So I lead for the Global Business Solutions Organization within MSD, and a very proud global co-lead for the Capability Network, EBRG, together with my amazing co-lead Hillary Reagan for the past 3 years, where we were able to grow our members 500% during this period to about 5,200 members today. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you, Susan.
And since this guide is designed precisely for someone like Jean, who's leading disability employee networks as they grow in influence, really pleased you could join us. I can't believe I didn't go to you instantly, Jean. So now I'm going to go to you.
Thanks, Susan. So a reminder, we had our global summit last year, and we brought together lots of global disability, ERG or network leaders together in a series of 12 summits, essentially asking them to vote on what were their priorities and what they wanted their business to focus on in terms of disability inclusion. And the results were really clear in terms of why we're here today, wanting an efficient and effective workplace adjustment process that would be fit for purpose for everyone to be able to access and use easily. And very much linked to this document that we're launching today, and I need to hold up the balloon if you want to download the document or if you want your hard copy, but very much linked to today as well, around listening to the lived experience directly from people with disabilities, and really to learn from that to change policies and processes in line with what we're talking about today, that actually you need to listen to genuine people that have tried the adjustment process, and if it hasn't worked, what's been the blocker and how you can then impact that. And then the third one, the third option that people voted for globally, and these were in 12 hubs, so from Nairobi, Tokyo, New York, London, Mexico City, across the globe. The third one was to focus on storytelling, to really listen to that lived experience, to normalise the conversations about disability. And for me, those three are all very much intrinsic to this volume today that you've got and the guide that you're able to access. So for me and for the organisations we work with, disability employee resource groups or networks can be critical friends to the business, can be guidance, can give that support, but they also create a safe space and a community where people can share their lived experience. But that also means they're a safe space where people can share their experience of the adjustment process. The things that perhaps haven't worked so well, they can create this safe space and then they're able to feed that information back to the business so the business can then take action. And it's really important that organisations listen to their disability networks, employee resource groups, and surface those insights so they can then learn and take that forward. So what were the networks and employee resource groups saying to us about why they decided that an effective and efficient workplace adjustment process was so important to their members and to them and to their organisation as well? So there's two elements to this. There's the impact in terms of the process, what that can do to someone's mental health. Is there a process? Is it long-winded? What's the approval process look like? Do I need to go to my line manager, or can I just do this anonymously? I perhaps don't want to have this conversation with my line manager. I don't want to have a conversation about a budget to ask for a mouse or to ask for a keyboard. I just need a mouse or a keyboard. So there's that process piece and that policy piece internally within organisations, but there's also then the human element to this. What that does to someone's confidence from an emotional perspective. Perhaps you've been rejected for a previous adjustment or the budget wasn't there for you to be able to do that. Equally, someone that hasn't been able to secure the adjustment they need, are they able to be as productive and have the same career prospects that someone that has been able to have an adjustment or hasn't needed an adjustment? So there's two elements. There's the process and then there's the well-being piece. And for me, this links really closely to the business. The impact on the business in terms of retention, in terms of well-being, in terms of retaining talent, and in terms of cost as well. And you'll see in the report the impact of increased costs if you need to re-recruit, reduction in occupational health as well. So, and to summarise, for me, the piece around humanity and around fairness and equality is really important. Everyone turns up to work to do a good job, to be productive, to perform, to progress their career, and not everyone is given that equal opportunity.
Thank you. I like the way the storytelling and the learning directly from people with disabilities feeds into improving a workplace adjustment service, because they're the only people who know what's going on, really. And so, Nasser, Microlink has managed adjustments for hundreds of thousands of employees with disabilities. I mean, I know you're working now with companies like GSK, KPMG, BAE Systems, Bank of England. And so the question I've got for you really is, why don't these companies just use doctors? Everywhere I go, people are saying, well, yes, we send them to our occupational health. We send them to a doctor. Why doesn't that seem to work for outfits like GSK, Bank of England, et cetera?
Well, that's a great question. We should be asking those companies who do, partly because when they go to the doctors, they come back with a positive confirmation they have a disability. Then what? They don't know how to remove the barriers they're facing because of their disability. So that's why you need to really provide a workplace assessment to understand the barriers they're facing because of their condition. And because those barriers are far easier removed using the kind of technologies, assistive technologies, or even ergonomics equipment that enables the individual to be far more productive. And of course, well-being is quite important because it has impact on the mental health, stresses and anxieties. And on top of that, they lose their motivation, they lose their focus. So just providing a bit of kit and a bit of training, a different type of kit, different type of training, essentially removes any problems they have in being great at their work. So I'm not sure if there is any justifiable logic of asking people to prove they have a medical condition. They just simply merely have to say, I can't do my job, help me out, I can do it much better in my job. And that should be a simple conversation.
Well, I think we assume, or some organizations assume, one, that making adjustments, doing things differently for someone is special treatment, not equal treatment. But the reason you're making adjustments is so that the individual can do their job on an equal basis with everyone else. But the other thing is there's some sort of an assumption that we're talking about the problem being the person's medical condition. So the example for me would be that the person has migraines. So that's their problem. Actually, the organization's problem and the lost productivity problem is that your manager refused to change the light bulb that triggers her migraines. Now, I know that sounds odd, but it happens all the time. Right, so I'm going to turn now to someone who sees this in terms of what disabled employees are really experience on a day-to-day basis. And so, Jean, this guide was written for network leaders like yourself. And I included the gap analysis and the 12 critical success factors as a kind of building tool for how you generate systems that work better. But I also put in 9 tips for employee network leaders. And I wanted to ask you which of those tips you felt were particularly important as you're setting out to influence. Usually, you know, you're working up the line, right? You're trying to influence C-suite right up there. Were any of those tips of particular use to you? And you're supposed to say yes. Yes?
Yes.
At least one.
No. I would say, from my perspective as an EBRG leader, Susan, all the 9 tips are hugely important depending on where you are in your journey of creating a fit-for-purpose workplace adjustment process, right? And of course, as a valuable resource for most, if not all, EBRG leaders like myself who are working to influence our senior leaders to move from a medical model to a productivity-based model of adjustments, right? So personally, the best tip to start with would be rightfully, of course, the first tip, which is focus on how the business benefits when everyone understands that the reason for making adjustments is to enhance productivity, trust, and engagement. And of course, tip number 3, which reminds everyone rightfully that apples fall down, not up, but if it does fall down from where you sit, I want to know where you are, what you've been drinking, and whether I can order it from Amazon. So similarly to apples fall down, the compliance and distrust cultures where people needing adjustments must first prove they have a disability to generate similar to the apples fall down, the compliance and distrust culture where people needing adjustments must first prove they have a disability, always generate greater risk than those which trust their people to self-refer and are seen to aspire to best practice. So I'll try to give a hypothetical example. I'm a Filipino Chinese working in a global company. English is not my native language, so having the Grammarly app to keep my spelling and grammar in order would be hugely beneficial for me. Now, if I request Grammarly, I would not have to take a genealogical or autosomal test to prove that I'm Filipino Chinese and therefore would be more productive with Grammarly. But now take me as a person with ADHD, requiring Copilot to be more efficient. Why do I now need a medical documentation to prove that I will be more productive with that? So as a whole, people with disabilities or the neurodivergence, I add neurodivergence because while some do not identify as disabled, for those who do, like myself, we acknowledge that many of our neurodivergent symptoms are disabling. So people with disabilities and neurodivergence are treated as a separate class of diversity because of the medical model our societies and governments and companies still subscribe to. So when people need to first prove their disability is already problematic, primarily because we know that many people do not feel safe to do that. And proof of that is that we are here in this conference today, launching Everybody Wins a Balloon, so we can enable greater inclusion in the corporate landscape and in the wider world, right? So I hear it all the time, also from my peers in other companies. Our leaders, while many are well-intentioned, they lack education. So people needing to prove their disability first is risky. You just imagine how much productivity is lost because people don't ask for what they need. And the 5th and 6th tips regarding the data you don't have can be more revealing than what you do have, and that productivity is a practical business imperative, not an ambiguous inclusion aspiration, are also great to use as discussion points with leaders. And of course, tip number 9, benchmarking at national level using the ILO GBDN self-assessment to drive continuous improvement is always good to understand what others are doing, right? And why, and to learn from each other, even if it's only to learn that, oh, that's not the way I want to go. So myself and Hillary, we will certainly be sharing this playbook with our senior leaders, our friends managing our accommodations process currently within the company, with the vice president of our global workplace enterprise services, our GDNI COE, our CHRO, who is a huge advocate and ally of the capability network. So definitely this playbook is tip top. Back to you, Susan. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I do love this story you're telling about how you can get Grammarly like that, because everybody would say, well, you've got English as a second language. But if you wanted a similar tool because you've got ADHD, you have to go to a doctor. And the doctor hasn't even heard of this tool, because, of course, doctors don't understand the kind of assistive technology because they have medical skills. And assistive technology is not a medical treatment. It is a solution that enhances job performance. Magic. Well, I wanted to come back, too, on the trust thing. I mean, you're familiar with companies like GSK that have been setting a standard in terms of proving that you can trust your people and the company doesn't go bankrupt. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, and it really links really well to Jean's point about proving before you ask for that adjustment. So imagine you needed to do that every time you applied for a promotion and every time you need to go through that process. Whereas actually, in reality, if you think about trust, how many people in reality are going to ask for a left-handed mouse? Not many people are going to put that request in, except people that need a left-handed mouse. So for me, the trust and allowing people to ask for whatever adjustment they need without the need to go through an application process or to prove their diagnosis. I'm telling you as an employee, and I'm a valued employee that wants to do well, that wants to be productive, would you be able to help me with this assistive technology? I will be more productive and I will do more work for you. To me, it makes complete business sense. But more importantly, from a human perspective, every time I change job role or move office, I don't need to ask that same question and prove that information over and over. You trust me as an individual to work well. This tool will help me to work well.
And I think on the trust, it's interesting that Andy Garrett, who manages the process worldwide that delivers adjustments within 20 days usually to every employee across GSK who needs it, is saying, why would I design a system for the 0.001% of my people who might abuse it? And yet how many HR directors have I heard say, oh, well, you know, we couldn't have a pre-approved catalog of kit because somebody might abuse it, as though how many people pretend they need a Braille keyboard, you know? But the point that Andy makes is you design a system for the 99% of your people who you can trust, that they're actually going to simply focus on what would make it easier for me to do my job. And so one of the big change agents here has been having pre-approved catalogs where your procurement people go through all the argy-bargy of proving that, yeah, these products are safe, we can bring them in, your IT people agree. How does that work? How many companies do you know have got these pre-approved catalogs, and how do you help them with that, Nasser?
We work with about 50, 60 large organizations currently, and the process is quite, to begin with, there is a bit of a fear that these products could potentially jeopardize their IT security. But once we talk to them, we give them information, the fears disappear overnight. So once they look at the range of products, these are productivity products as well. They're not just for disabled people. Very quickly, they onboard them, and once they license it so that it runs across the state, they can deploy that globally, much easier than having to buy individual licenses, for example, for assistive software. But more importantly, as you quite highlighted, it's much easier to mitigate the impact of disability rather than fix the condition. So when people come to you and say, we need help, They're not asking you to help them to fix their dyslexia or ADHD or, God forbid, vision loss. They just say, I need to do my work and give me some tools I can do it with. And that's the process, very simple. And these programs are few, there aren't endless number of them. And once you start using them, you find the benefits of productivity for the whole general population as well. Dragon, naturally speaking, which is being used by a lot of disabled people, is one of the most productive software used by enterprises. Same goes mind mapping program. So introduction of these programs would benefit a lot of other people, and they are benefiting a lot of people. But for us, the process of identifying barriers is much quicker, much easier, and very low cost. So it's not even worth sending someone to medical diagnosis, which costs a lot more and it takes a lot longer.
In fact, what is the average cost when you manage the end-to-end delivery process from the request to, usually people need more than one kind of adjustment, maybe a bit of KID, a bit of flexi time, a bit of this. What's the usual cost of that whole package?
If you break it down, and we're talking about the well-run, mature workplace adjustment program, there are 4 costs involved. One is the assessment to identify the barriers, what the individual requires. That would be around about $200-300, depends on how you run this. The cost of assistive software and hardware together will be less than $400. That's the average. And the cost of end-to-end management, which is very important, critical to implement the program from start to finish, coordination with all the internal stakeholders, external providers, that's around, again, $400. And finally, training, similar cost, $400. So training and coaching, including the assistive software and maybe coping strategies. These are very affordable costs that will actually be a fraction of the money you spend on not doing it. I know that you've done a report in 2016. Doing an adjustment is equivalent to reducing the absenteeism by a disabled person by 4 days. And we know from our data, somewhere like 5% of the workforce would take more than 4 weeks sick leave in a year, minimum. And we have people been out of work for nearly 3 years, requiring a tiny adjustment, but they can't because they won't make it. So just imagine the money being wasted for not doing it.
And I do think one of the reasons drafting this document was such a challenge is the data's not there. Because even inside large organizations, we find they're not tracking absenteeism, sickness absence. So they don't have a sense of how many days off that woman took because of migraines because they left the light bulb, arguing it was going to be too tricky to figure out who was supposed to put the light bulb through. But also what we find is that managers are taking decisions to deny people adjustments in such an ad hoc way that the C-suite don't know what's happening. They've no idea that people are waiting so long. They've no idea how much sickness absence is being triggered by the failure to respond quickly. And what I found fascinating was I couldn't get any calculation of how much management time was wasted whenever an employee lodged a complaint. Never mind when they actually took you to a tribunal or to court. So they're not even tracking the argy-bargy. That's the technical term in a business, right? When you've got a complaint and the managers have to respond and you have to log what happened, they don't even know. What we do know is that in the UK, a lawyer is estimating that it's costing £8,000 to £10,000 for a company to defend itself in tribunal if a disabled employee says, you took too long to make this adjustment. Whereas the adjustment would have cost $1,000 to $1,200, right? So they're spending infinitely more on managing the dysfunction than just saying, okay, we need a managed response. And the reason we don't have data is because we have an unmanaged response. So you get into a cycle where you can't justify generating a new cost center to manage it because you don't have the data that proves you have a problem because it's unmanaged. And so you get stuck. So I just got kind of tired by the stuckness. Stuckness is an important word in this analysis. I'd like to come back to you, to Jean. Jean, when you're talking to senior players, what kind of insights into your world as employees do you think are having the most impact? How do you have those conversations? How do you facilitate that learning directly from your own people now that you've got some 5,000 of your colleagues involved? How does that work? And how is it focusing on adjustments?
So thank you for the question, Susan. So I would reference what Sally said earlier. I think it's really critical for employee business resource groups to have that safe space for people to share what is working for them, what is not working. So for us, we make sure that we have this regularly. We have forums where people come and share their stories, and we send out regular surveys, and we make sure we collect the data, analyze the results of the survey, and we forward them appropriately to the proper people who would be able to look at the content and be able to act on them. Yeah, so in terms of accommodations, we were able to speak to our people to say what has been working for them, what has been not, and we have been working together with our accommodations team to improve where we can. And of course, we are our CHRO, who is a big ally for the capability network. We have frequent touch-ins with her, so we share where we are, and we have a big meeting, for example, with the accommodations team. We've created a team to look at what does our North Star look like for the, like you said, fit for purpose accommodations adjustments management process. So we are going to be doing this, and this is where the toolkit is very important, the playbook, because now it gives us a guidance how to speak to our leaders, what are the things that we need to look at. So it's really critical.
Excellent. Thank you. And actually, as we're winding down now, we've only got 3 minutes left. I wanted to come back because you've mentioned your CHRO as a key ally for you. That actually, human resources in most organizations, we're not recommending that they take responsibility for adjustment management. Because, of course, they need to, whoever runs your adjustment management system needs to have the authority to get your guys in technology to behave differently, to get procurement on board, to get property and facilities management lined up. What we're suggesting is the time has come to look at the role of a chief productivity officer. We do see chief productivity officers starting to emerge in some corporations. And of course, their task is efficiency, productivity, giving everybody the tools they need, surely to goodness. Giving somebody a left-handed mouse is part of their game. And I love this image of the left-handed mouse, because if you had a chief finance officer who was left-handed, as you alluded to earlier, Jean, she would just get a left-handed mouse. But if she lost her hand in a car accident, I bet you they would send her to a doctor. We could just save so much bother if you just gave her a left-handed mouse, right? And so that's the transition that we're trying to make. So I'd be very interested in feedback from our colleagues here at the Zero Project and afterwards, in terms of, I want to talk to some chief productivity officers. Are we going down the right track here? Is that where the solution is? Knowing, for example, that in GSK, the responsibility for adjustment sits in property and facilities management, because, of course, often it is the built environment that has to be adapted. So I'm going to quickly go around to most of my colleagues here. 30 seconds. What is the most important thing about the launch that you want to share with our audience today?
Listen to the lived experience, use that information, and use those top tips from the network to then take that to your C-suite and make changes happen.
And go straight to C-suite. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, and if you have a situation where almost a quarter of your workforce requires different way of working, the cost is affordable, then you should fund the program rather than do a DIY. And obviously, you need expertise as well. So that's where most companies put their effort, doing it internally, trying to fix the problem, which requires expertise and not funded.
And let's end with that statistic. 25% of any large workforce will have a disability and/or health condition. So should you be compelling people who don't describe themselves as having a disability, they've got a health condition, to take on the label so that you can consider even thinking about making an adjustment that would make it easier for them to do their job. That's it from us, and do celebrate the launch.